there's a gift of all our trauma. We can really be grateful for those things that happened that weren't ideal growing up, and maybe keep the gift and remove the part that holds us back.
My guest today is Neil Strauss, famous writer for the Rolling Stone magazine and author of multiple best-selling books.
Unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments. You can tell a trauma is at work or just something you need to heal if you have the exact opposite result of your intention.
What does that mean?
Meaning that my intention is to make sure I don't get abandoned, but my behavior is getting me abandoned. Well, there's something to look at. If I'm feeling really, really sad and disconnected, and I'm making it your job to make those parts of me feel better, that's bad boundaries.
Today, we're talking about love, fidelity, and that search for authentic connections.
And I know people who are Olympic athletes who won the gold medal, who literally in private conversation are like, I'm gonna fail, I can't do this. It's okay to doubt yourself, but you're gonna doubt yourself and do it anyway.
Welcome to today's episode of the Mindvalley Show. I'm your host, Megan Pormer, and today we have a special guest who's not only a New York Times best-selling author, but also a master storyteller. My guest today is Neil Strauss, famous writer for the Rolling Stone magazine and author of multiple best-selling books. Today, we're talking about his most famous book called The Truth, which is an uncomfortable book about relationships. This was a raw and revealing exploration of love, fidelity, and that search for authentic connection. So I'm very excited to have Neil in the studio today. Please welcome Neil Strauss. Obviously, I read your first book, The Game. That book is my biggest nightmare. For the reason I don't understand. Since I remember myself as an adult, I've been trying to not believe that all men think about is how to be a better pickup artist, right? I want to think that there are some sacred men out there that they have tamed their ego. I'm not saying they don't have certain biological, characteristics, but they've tamed it enough to really be devoted to one woman. And then when I read The Game, I'm like, I don't want to think that there's a world out there, because that makes me feel like every time I see a man, he might be like a pickup artist. And I'm scared of those men because they can destroy me emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And I am never going to be that strong to survive, any kind of interaction like that, because I am, as a woman, someone that if I'm physical, if I'm involved in the physical body, I'm involved on the spiritual, mental, and emotional bodies altogether. Right. They're not separate, right? And then, so Vision comes to me and he's like, I need you to read this book called The Truth. I said, oh, so what is it about? He says, it's a difficult book about relationships. I'm like, perfect. I'm definitely not reading that. And apparently by Neil, not happening. He tried to burst my bubble once. Right. I had enough.
Right.
He's like, no, you got to read it. And I didn't want to read it because I wasn't comfortable to face my own shadows in relationship yet.
Right.
At the time. But then I read the book, and I think it's been the most liberating phase of my life ever since I've read it. I feel like I no longer am going to replay my household that I grew up in, in my relationships.
Right.
And I know that you went through your personal relationship and you feel like you sabotaged it, and that was the inspiration to write the book. But how did you go from pickup artistry to monogamy?
Yeah. And you said at the beginning before we started this, I want to hear your heart. So can I give you my heart reaction to what you're saying versus answering the question?
Please.
Yeah. So I'm noticing two things, right? When what you're saying, one is I notice a lot of fear around men and their intentions, right? For example, for me, it literally even says in the book, again, the book's got all its problems, and certainly I've done a lot of work on myself since. But to me, I just didn't want to end up as somebody who wasn't married and didn't have a child. My intention even in going in wasn't oh, I want to be with a different person every night. My intention was you said we're going to talk about loneliness later, right? My intention was I was lonely, and I wanted to make, I felt like one of my life purposes to be in partnership, to be an amazing father, to have a child, and I felt like I wouldn't fulfill my life purpose because I was so uncomfortable around women. So I think but what I hear, the book is interesting because it's a lightning rod. People project whatever it may be onto the book. Mm-hmm. So I hear like a lot of fear and control stuff in what you're saying. Because the truth is like whether we're falling in love with someone or just being physically vulnerable with someone and sleeping with them, it's such an unknown and it's such a vulnerability. And of course, we hope that it's going to end up a certain way, but we have no idea what it's going to be. And maybe courage is like taking that risk and knowing we're going to be okay no matter what. Right? There's a great line. Like I think people's fears around dating and the people that they date or the people they're attracted to, like often become self-fulfilling prophecies, and you're projecting that onto someone or something. Like, because what I'm hearing you saying is a lot of fear. I don't want to think that guys are like that and people are like that, but some guys are like that, some guys are not like that. Like, and
I'm projecting my fears onto them.
Yeah.
Do you think deep down it's just because I'm not just speaking on behalf of me?
Right.
I'm speaking on behalf of over 1 million women that I have in my community, right? So this is how deep down a lot of us, I'm not saying all women, but a lot of us perceive men.
Right, and a lot of people don't. I think you want to be careful of making a generalization at all about anybody.
Exactly. No, I'm talking on behalf of me here.
Right.
And any woman who's listening to this, that is in this phase of her life and feels this way, right? I can only speak on behalf of me and people who have the certain
feels this way, and
emotions.
what's this way?
Being fearful of men emotionally.
Is love possible with fear?
No.
And whose responsibility is your emotional safety?
Myself.
And like, and I think that's what it is. If there's a real, so like walking into a love situation with fear, making your emotional safety someone else's responsibility is always already setting something up to fail. I'm not saying we should just trust everyone 100%, but come in and just meet you where you're at. And then if I'm seeing the signs of this is not what I hoped it would be, and by the way, it's never what we hoped it would be ever, but can I still live with who you are? And if I can't, then I get to move on. So I think like that but that kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop or walk into someone with fear, into a situation with fear, sets up a situation where it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Wow.
Right.
So you think we're projecting like that? We have personal fears which we project onto the relationship, and therefore we set it up for failure.
Yes. Okay. 100%. Think about this. There's the person who is afraid of being abandoned, right? And so consequently, they're like, who are we out with? What were you doing? I just checked your phone and I saw this text. Why are you talking to your like ex from 10 years ago? Were you really out at work, 2 hours later? And then that creates their own abandonment, right? So a lot of people are really scared of being abandoned and then treat someone with a lot of fear and distrust. Then that person starts to withdraw from them and they end up recreating their abandonment.
They basically manifest what they put their energy into. That's like another way of saying it. Yeah. I speak in the language of energy. That's the easiest language for me. Basically, whatever energy you put out, it comes back to you. If you put the intention and the energy of abandonment, you receive abandonment.
That's one way to say it. However, but by the way, I'm a big believer in the power of negative thinking. So let's get back to that.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is there are certainly things that I thought I could never do and would never be possible, yet I still did them. I put all the negative energy, and I know people who are Olympic athletes who won the gold medal, who literally in private conversation are like, I'm going to fail. I can't do this. I think we put too much pressure on people by saying you need to think positively all the time. You need to say affirmations in the mirror every day. It's okay. We all doubt ourselves sometimes. We're all insecure. We all sometimes think we can't do it, and then maybe we can prove ourselves wrong. So I think it's almost too much pressure on people to say you have to put only positive, I can do it energy out there. If you don't, you're going to fail.
Affirmations are becoming like a mental pressure. Like saying your affirmation is suppressing your emotions.
Right. And I have to believe in myself at all times. It's okay to doubt yourself, but you're going to doubt yourself and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Or you're going to not be sure and try it anyway.
Yeah.
So, but back to what we're saying about these self-fulfilling prophecies, really what I'm saying is you can tell a trauma is at work or there's something you need to heal if you have the exact opposite result of your intention. Meaning that my intention is to make sure I don't get abandoned, but my behavior is getting me abandoned. Well, there's something to look at.
Let me repeat that.
Yes.
You can say there is trauma at work if what you're getting is different than what you're setting your intention to.
Right.
So let's go back
like even myself, I can see I might be anxious about having something go right. So I try to like super control it, right? And then people maybe around me get nervous, they want to please me, and it kind of goes wrong. And so my goal is for everything to go perfectly, but my anxiety that things will go wrong makes them go imperfectly. So then I realize that's something I need to work on. right? So we all have that example. So if you look at where you're getting the exact opposite result of your intention, and it also doesn't feel good, that's probably what your work is to do right now.
So being in your marriage and not basically, and the marriage not surviving, made you dig deeper into what made you sabotage the relationship, or like what created the disharmony. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think in my case, what happened, there was something I was going to say about yours, but we'll get back to it. In my case, I think what happened was
By the way, can I acknowledge something? I think you can't help to first, like, really be giving me a therapy session and helping me.
Well,
with
I'm
my
more interested in
mindset.
you than me because I already know me. You know?
I know, I can see
Right,
that.
right.
I can see, and feel free, please do, because
Yeah.
people that are listening to this are mainly like women. They're women, and most of them, they think like me.
Yeah.
That's why Vision picked me for this interview.
Yeah.
So go for it, because
Yeah.
whatever you think is healing
Yeah.
for me is probably healing for
Right.
anybody who's listening
And
to
to step
it.
back, like, I feel like we're in a massive culture of fear right now, and we're just creating whole ideas, groups of people, and enemy. And I think it's a dangerous thing when you create enemies that consist of like hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And so it's interesting when I wrote the game, and I really mean this. And again, I'm sure the book has tons of horrible stuff in it. It's been many years, but my intention was that it was a book about male insecurity. It was never about like. And it begins with a guy who was the greatest pickup artist in the world about to kill himself. So it wasn't like this works it was really a lot about toxic masculinity and male insecurity. And I literally thought women would read and feel empowered when they saw how sort of sad and pathetic and needy the men were. And most of the guys I met in that quote unquote pickup artist world, I think the media's turned into something else, were really like neurodivergent people trying to figure out how to socially interact. There were for sure some like super toxic sociopaths in that world, 100%. But most of these guys trying to learn it, even for me personally, we're on a journey. So to me, that opened up the door to self-improvement for me. And all the stuff we'll be talking about later about everything I know about trauma and everything else was because I was lonely and trying to solve it and went with this flawed, messed up group of guys. But that put me on the path to really learning I can change myself. And I can look at myself and I'm not stuck with, who I am at age, whatever it is, 23, feeling insecure, lonely, uncomfortable with myself, like low self-worth and all the other things.
So basically, the messaging of the game was that being a pickup artist stems from a lot of trauma and a lot of unhappiness, and it doesn't end in a happy place.
I mean, I think the message is like putting on a false mask and set of behaviors to meet other people is not going to result in great intimacy. Like, I think, and also trying to be a fake alpha male, and the book ends like Lord of the Flies with all these pickup artists fighting each other. It was really like a exploration of it versus advocacy of it. But but the point being, it's not more about the book. It's more about, I read a news story on this book. I'm afraid there are pickup artists out there. It makes me sad when I hear things create more fear. We already have too much fear. As an example, we just don't know what's going to happen when we meet someone. There was one guy in the book who was quote unquote pickup artist, and I don't want to get stuck on that whole book. It's a long time ago, but he went to a bar, within 15 minutes hooked up with someone in the bathroom, and now they're married. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, And I think that whether you're looking for a partner, you're looking for something to happen in your career, be a musician, be an artist, be an entrepreneur, if you don't open yourself up to others and take the risk, then some of those people are not going to be great others to deal with. Those things aren't going to happen. Here's the last comment I was going to make, which is our goal is to be whole people meeting whole people. So to go to the other side of what you said about that emotional, I'm afraid about my emotional safety, right? There's a great quote that a therapist in that book, The Truth, told me. And she was like, no one can abandon you unless you're a dependent child or a dependent elder, or someone who nobody can abandon you except yourself, right? So if you meet someone, again, it is horrible. I know very few people in relationships who have not had some relationship that's incredibly toxic, incredibly, that's horrible, sometimes emotionally and physically dangerous. They're really, I want to do a whole project about this, but there really are scary people out there that hook into our psychological wounds and start to control us. For sure that happens. But instead of, maybe our goal is to make ourselves whole so that as soon as we see those things going on, we get out, right? And we close all contact. We go to the resources that we need. There are plenty of resources, amazing free resources online. But we want to make ourselves whole so that we don't have fear.
We don't have fears that those unhealthy personality types can basically pretend as if they're filling.
Right.
Because when we have holes, sometimes we fill it with toxin.
Right. Yeah.
Because we're so desperate to fill it with something, we can fill it with toxin. Right.
Right.
Two things came to my mind.
Because I do think like, and again, none of this, I mean, I think there's two types of, let's say, relationships that go bad. The relationships where we have a lot of expectations and excitement and the partnership doesn't work out or the person's just bad and we're really hurt and we're abandoned and we're in pain. And then there are people who really have a pathological need to control, to harm, to hurt, to, the kinds of people who really are toxic and dangerous, start taking away your car, taking away your job, taking away your friends, and so you're completely dependent, and then the cycle of abuse starts. And there are people out there like that 100%.
And those are psychopaths and sociopaths, I guess.
I mean, they have different personality disorders, right? Some are narcissists, but there's some, whatever, what's like a narcissist or like extreme borderline or psychopaths, but for sure.
Would you say people, psychopaths and sociopaths and narcissists and all those unhealthy personality types that are going around really hurting people, do you think these are the people that in the past were actual killers and, people that would actually kill people, but in the past there was no judgment against it, there was no legal prosecution? Now those people, because they were scared of their own image, so they don't want to end up behind bars, they kill people psychologically.
No.
Okay.
I think that these personality disorders always existed. I think these personality or disorders manifest in different ways, right? Mm-hmm. So for those people, the issues are around their mother wounds and their holes around there. And as an example, Robert Hare, who is the person who really did some of the best research on psychopathy. I can't believe we're definitely going places I didn't expect. Okay. But he did a book so his first book was about psychopaths who, like you say, murder. Mm-hmm. But his second book was called Snakes in Suits. Mm-hmm. And it's about people who rise to the top, often in politics and business, who are also sociopaths, right? And for sure, there are definitely people who...
Sorry, the one
it's called Snakes in Suits.
Which means people that are...
people who are also sociopaths and psychopaths. But they, and who rise to the top in politics and in business. And he studied people who rise to the top in that, and often they're sociopaths. But for sure, it's not.
Because they seek power and control. If their intention is to seek power and control over people, 100%.
Right.
If you're becoming a politician because you seek power and control over people, do you think that's a healthy personality?
I mean, I think seeking power and control is not
healthy, let alone wanting to get over a large group of people.
But some people want to be politicians because they really want to help.
Yeah, that's a different story.
So I think we want to be careful about saying all psychopaths kill, all politicians want power, all whatever.
I think we should talk about intentions. It really depends on the intention. It's not so much about the behavior; it's the intention. Somebody becomes a politician because they want to serve. The intention is serving.
I don't mean to contrarian everything, but their intention might be their own emotional safety, but they might not care about the other person's emotional safety as long as they have theirs. So maybe it's not about intention. Maybe it's about something else. I'm just thinking out loud.
But again, intention can be emotional safety. Mm-hmm. Again, that's an intention.
Right.
Emotional safety, which is still negative and can emotionally hurt the other person. Not as much as the other category, though.
I really do. I think a lot of people who did the most evil things in the world, in their minds and to other people, had good intentions. Nobody who has evil thinks they have bad intentions. There are very few people who do that. I was doing a project with a person who actually is a sociopathic killer. He literally has murdered people. I should not have done the project. But he really literally said to me, I was with him one day and he's like, it's okay, you're with me, God is on my side. And if he ever harms someone, he doesn't just harm someone for fun. He thinks of a really good reason why they deserve it. And that he's doing the right thing.
Got it.
So I think we need to be careful. I think it's more about questioning our intentions. We have to really look at ourselves all the time and think, what are my intentions? Are they good in my life? Are they good in other people's lives? Because I think we're in a world where a lot of people really think they're right. And they're righteous about being right. And who's bad and who's wrong. And there's a saying, which you probably know, all perpetrators perpetrate from a position of victim, right? So it's people never think they're wrong when they're doing things that are wrong. Most of the atrocities that happen in the world happen because of fear. And if we look at anything now, I'm afraid of those people in the country next to us are going to take over our country. I'm afraid of fear. Nothing good comes of fear, and I studied, like I really studied this. I went to like meet with the person who discovered like the amygdala and what it does. Like, so I've actually really studied fear, and fear creates a lot of horrible behavior and decisions in people. And he made a great distinction between fear and anxiety. So fear to him, fear is the actual amygdala response. The amygdala is not the emotional center, and he feels like it's been misunderstood about what he said. Joseph Ledoux is his name. So the amygdala is just a response. There's a rattlesnake or something that fears to an immediate threat. Right now we have no immediate threat, right? So anything that you and I worry about is anxiety. That happens in a different part of the brain. So anxiety is about what's going to happen in the future. Fear is about there's immediate threat here. So if we can separate fear, which is a healthy survival thing, from anxiety, which is future projection of things that could go wrong, and then trying to solve for them.
So fear is healthy, anxiety is not. Fear can be healthy.
Yeah, and there's a healthy anxiety. I think every emotion has a purpose. There's a healthy side to it, and then there's a unhealthy side in its extremes. People might say sadness is great sometimes. It's hard if it's depression or suicidal ideation. It's bad, but just being deactivated and going inside yourself and shutting down is sometimes a nice thing to do. Anger is nice when it's assertiveness, and
anger
your
is
needs
nice
mattering. And when it's rage, it's horrible.
Yeah.
So I think every emotion is good within a functional range.
Back to your book.
Go ahead, back to my book. Okay.
The truth.
Yes.
You talked about attachment styles,
right?
Which, as you can imagine, I read about it all the time. But when you first started talking about attachment styles, like this is back in 2015, not many people were talking about this subject and how attachment styles are the core of most of this harmonies in relationships. And you talked about something called enmeshment, which I'm still trying to understand. Can you give our audience a brief summary of attachment styles in your language?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I do feel like it's almost become trendy now. And thank you for noticing that no one was talking about it at the time.
No.
And so it's really exciting. And now I feel like there's a danger to it being trendy and people dismissing it, because I don't think it's a trend. Like, it's good to understand our psychological wiring. And then B, I think a lot of people misunderstand it. So I'll start with a misunderstanding now, which is not how I've explained in the past. I think the misunderstanding is someone thinks I'm a love addict because I want to be in love. I'm a love avoidant because I'm avoiding love. But a lot of people who are love addicts actually avoid that because it makes them vulnerable and it's scary, so they might not have a relationship. So just because I'm avoiding relationships because I'm scared of them or I don't want to, for whatever reason, that's not how it works. I think in my way of thinking about it or seeing it from what I've studied and experienced myself, I think generally the pattern is set up by the parent of whatever sex you're attracted to, right? So it's generally set up. That's generally the template. So in other words, if you're attracted to men and dad wasn't there for you physically, anything could happen. Your dad can always be there, but just emotionally disconnected. That's going to show up as abandonment. Your dad can pass away when you're 3 and nothing to do with you, but that's still going to feel like abandonment to 3 and when you're that young and your brain's that young. So the basic template being is everyone knows about abandonment, and that generally leads to making your partner your kind of higher power, and that would be the love addiction. And a lot of that is when we're in a fantasy. Love addict can create that fantasy about who someone is when they're not that person, and giving away your emotional safety and your power to that person. It's a little bit what you're describing.
I have, and this is a conversation I have in my head every single day.
Right.
I don't think any man is ever gonna want me for my emotions. Like, I feel like my emotions are something that I would always have to downplay because no man is gonna want to deal with my emotions.
And which emotions is that?
I have a lot. I'm a deep feeler.
Right.
And it's just so hard. I need a lot of reassurance, affirmations.
So here, let me give you sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. You need a lot of reassurance. Affirmations.
And I've already made it an active decision because for many, many years, I was just looking for that, that connection where you feel fully safe and loved for who you are, right? And your emotions aren't too much. And then you don't have to worry that, okay, maybe with this level of emotion, no man is ever going to want to be with me.
So here's a reframe on that. Can I give this to you?
Yes.
Okay. I think men have and will love you for your emotions, because I think what you're describing is someone who really is capable of connecting very deeply and powerfully. I think that, so men will and do love you for emotions. The challenge is you finding the boundaries around your emotions, right?
Yeah.
Like how much do you make, it's just finding the healthy containment around our emotions.
What does that mean?
Meaning that if I'm feeling really, really sad, and I'm going to make this up, I don't know if it's true, but I'm feeling really, really sad and disconnected and insecure and uncomfortable, and I'm making it your job to make those parts of me feel better, that's bad boundaries. Because another way to do it, and we can still feel all those things. Those feelings are common, and
so love exists.
Love totally exists.
That deep connection exists.
Yeah. So instead, taking that time to really self-soothe, to just kind of correct the reality, to look at what's really going on, saying, okay, this happened and I felt sad. And later you can talk to them and say, in a way, when you said you were going to be home for the weekend, but then you made plans to go to Vegas with your friends. I felt really sad and hurt about that.
Although if that happens, I'm not going to even be there to have that conversation, but sure.
It's worth having the conversation. It's worth it. So
after I leave,
no,
obviously.
I think there's a great saying, which is, it's credited to me, but I did not say this. It's credited to me everywhere online, but I didn't say it. I just want to clarify. Someone else told it to me, and I think it even came from Now I just want to say that because I see all these quotes, some quotes from different. The saying is, unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments.
Unspoken expectations are premeditated resentment.
Meaning, in this case of going to Vegas for the weekend when you guys had plans, if they come back and you'd say, so in other words, sometimes someone did that, so I'm leaving them. But do we ever say that was one of our boundaries or something that was important to us? Do we ever say, all the time, we give people tests, but we don't tell them what test they're taking, and they always fail it, right? So you really have to be in great communication. By the way, nonviolent communication, which has a horrible name, but is the best relationship tool I've ever found. And I'm kind of saying it, and it's simplest version is it's facts, feelings, needs, requests. So every communication is that 4 steps. So this is what I mean about boundaries. If you just sort of spill out without containment, everything you're thinking and feeling, that's a lot of energy, right? And one thing about human beings is that when they hear accusations, right and wrong, punishment, reward, criticisms, they just start to defend themselves and you can't connect. But we can communicate our feeling reality without making accusations and criticisms. So then you see, let's say your partner did that. Instead of leaving, you might say, hey, we had made plans for this weekend. You went to Vegas with your friends. Facts. Feelings are, when that happened, I feel really sad and hurt. Feelings. Needs are, I feel like I need trust and connection and safety, right? And then request. And right now there's nothing, they can't really get mad about it. No one's going to have you've said nothing that made it wrong. It's just a fact. You had a discussion, you did this. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but this is my feeling about it. And the request is, in the future, if we make a plan, can you just discuss it with me before making another plan? And they're free to say yes or no. If they say no, then you're like, okay, maybe I get that. This may not be right for what I'm looking for. Yes, great. That means a lot. Thanks for listening. Let's see what happens.
Wow.
Right?
Art of communication, I guess.
Yeah.
It comes down to that art of communication.
And so when we talk about those boundaries is, if you can take all that chaos that is sometimes going on inside and all that and just break it down into facts that a movie camera would see, feelings, and by the way, Marshall Rosenberg created this. It makes a great distinction. So if you're sad, is that a feeling? Sad? That's a feeling. If you're betrayed, feeling betrayed, is that a feeling?
Yeah.
No.
It's a thought.
Yes, and it's an accusation. So he makes this nice difference that our feelings are just really the feelings we feel, but sometimes we think, I felt disrespected, right? That's a thought.
So sadness and accusations are thoughts, not feelings.
Sorry, sadness is a feeling. Sadness, pain, anger, hurt, love, all those things are feelings, but a thought would be betrayed. Like, what is the feeling of being betrayed? When you're betrayed, when you make up that you're betrayed, you feel sad.
Mhm.
So you want to be careful not to make accusations as feelings like betrayed and disrespected. A lot of times someone might feel disrespected, but the person didn't intend disrespect. Going back to intentions.
Wow.
So,
I love that.
and then the needs are we all have these basic needs, you know, and then the request is someone's free to say yes or no to the request. So the boundary around it is, I think that emotional depth you have is like probably like a superpower, you know? And I imagine it makes like whoever is with you is like super fortunate to be with someone who's super connected emotionally and really, really caring and like really present for them. They can probably get to a level of depth they can't with people who don't have that.
Do you think my emotional power is my emotional depth is my superpower and not my weakness?
No. But it's like anyone with a superpower, right? It's like,
It can be too much.
right. You have to go, they get trained, right? They have a laser vision, but they're like you know, walls are falling apart and buildings are being destroyed because they can't control their superpower, right?
Yes.
So then
That's what happens.
That's it. Exactly. So you just have to go through the training so you can learn to control the superpower.
Got it.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's superpower.
Otherwise, you're destroying things.
Yes, it can be destructive.
Yeah.
I love this. Okay, so back to attachment.
Back to attachment. Okay. So we're going back to your.
So first of all, this is what I'm trying to understand. Do we recreate in our relationships the same attachment styles we experienced with our parents?
We love what's familiar, right? So and when we're talking about some of these really toxic people in these really, really toxic situations, often they grew up people talk about trauma bonding a lot. Trauma bonding is, well, we love our parents, but our parents could be emotionally or physically abusive, and we have this love, and it's kind of confusing. And then later, we trauma bond. We fall in love, or we're loyal to people who are physically or emotionally abusive because it's familiar. There's a great test you can take online by Patrick Carnes, C-A-R-N-E-S, called the PTSI. Side note, don't take the PTSI-R. It's his revised version. Do his original PTSI. He asks you a bunch of questions, and it'll tell you how your trauma shows up in your life today. In other words, you and I can experience the same trauma. But for some people, it might manifest as trauma abstinence, meaning like I will just avoid everything. And it could manifest as trauma repetition. I just keep recreating my trauma over and over again. So it'll tell you what your kind of biggest patterns are. I highly recommend it. It's the PTSI. It's free online.
So empath women attracted to narcissistic men. Let's just go there.
Okay, so yeah, I definitely think they're like narcissistic. I think there are many reasons why like people might be attracted to narcissists, but for sure, I don't think it's about being empathic, right?
But they love empaths.
Yeah.
Like narcissists love empaths.
Yeah, because they love people who are like, oh, what's wrong with me? I got to look at myself more. I got to work in this relationship more, while they just go around like terrorizing. But for sure, I think it's that there's a hole where someone's not complete, and they hook up into that and become, you know, they slowly. It's like a cult, right? A cult finds the weakness and then takes away anything that's a threat to them, and then has like the total kind of control. And that often comes from like, you know, from an abandonment wound, and then just looking for someone to fill that hole, right? And often it does come from having a narcissistic parent, and then you're attracted to, you know, a narcissistic partner for sure. But there are many different reasons and things that narcissists hook into.
So a narcissistic parent can make his or her child attracted to a narcissistic partner.
It can, but more commonly, it tends to be more somebody who's got abandoned by the partner that tends to go for the narcissistic. It goes for the narcissistic partner. I think, just to like get back to the enmeshment side for a second. So we talked about abandonment. I'm just going to kind of shift a little bit because I don't think that's true about the narcissistic parent to narcissistic partner. What happens more often is the avoidant has the narcissistic parent. So the idea of the narcissistic parent, to some degree, there's different levels of it, is the parent's needs are more important than your needs as a child. So we talked about enmeshment. Enmeshment is the parent. Healthy parenting is the child's needs come first. Narcissistic parent or enmeshing parent is my emotional needs are more important than your needs. So it shows up in many ways. Like it could be just could sometimes just be a depressed parent, you know, and there's an emotional narcissism there where the child is around to make them feel better. An anxious parent who's always over controlling, well, where are you? But it's not for your safety, it's for their safety, right? And so when we have an enmeshing parent who makes their needs more important than our needs, we then go get into relationships and start to feel smothered, or usually we get into relationships with someone we can save or help or support, like we did for the enmeshing parent. And then after a while, we start to resent them and feel suffocated by them, and we start to act out. That's kind of the love avoidant enmeshment piece, if that makes sense.
Oh, wow. So enmeshment, in fact, is when you are really attached to the person, but not because you really like them, just because you think it's their job to provide your needs, or they have to provide your needs.
Are you talking about in a parent-child relationship, or a love partnership, like a relationship?
What's the difference? Enmeshment in parenthood versus in partnership?
Yeah, I mean, the difference is, I'm thinking of enmeshment as a parenting style. Abandonment, enmeshment, functional parenting. So I'm thinking of it as a partnership, as a parenting style.
Oh, you're saying enmeshment parenting style can cause the child to have the avoidant attachment style.
Right. And then the adult child thinks, I get my worth and value by taking care of needy people. Thus, I choose a needy partner. Then I resent the needy partner for being too needy. And then I start to break out of the relationship and the pattern, or act out and distance myself and withdraw. They have abandonment issues, so they start to withdraw, and it creates a whole cycle.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah.
So,
I think the thing to learn, like, here's a way just to pull back, because I feel like we're jumping all over the place. Here's just like an overall way to think about it.
Perfect.
We're born and we have all our brain cells, but the wiring hasn't happened yet, right? So in childhood, at an alarmingly fast rate, that wiring happens really quickly. And then as adults, we're acting out of the way we were programmed growing up. So once we recognize the programs, right, and there are these different programs we're running on, then we can start to free ourselves from, like, run a virus scan on ourselves and free ourselves from the programming. That's why I think that even though that trauma attachment style stuff feels overused and cliched on Instagram now, but that's why I think really, really deeply understanding what your parenting was, what behaviors it led to, allows you to change. And also not identify with it. Probably things that we had to be to survive growing up. Like, what do you say? Like, you've said you're very emotional, and what do you think was the survival reason growing up? What was important to be emotional?
As far as I remember myself, I was always feeling things others weren't. Like, I would go to a happy place with school with a bunch of kids, and I would sense some heaviness.
Right. But so my question is, and I'm just throwing a fish glance to tell me if it resonates or not. I feel like there may have been something in your family that you had to be highly attuned to in order to survive.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah. I mean, as an example, like someone who had a parent who was a very strong figure, that their moods maybe control the entire household or something. For that person can become very empathic and emotionally attuned because they have to kind of read that parent to survive that situation.
Maybe what I feel, I not only feel a lot, I like to share it and be understood. I think my thing came from the fact that I felt like my emotions weren't heard or understood as a child.
Right.
I was feeling this is my story. And
yeah, that's good. I'm hearing.
My subconscious obviously I can only see to a certain level into my subconscious at the moment. Maybe you can help me dig deeper. What I remember is having a certain yearning in my heart, and this is me age 2, that there is this real like oneness love. It's just this yummy, like divine kind of sacred love that I'm looking for, right? And I'm feeling it. And I'm trying to describe to my mother, to my father, I wouldn't even bother describing to, or my grandparents, to people about this, and nobody gets it, right? And not only they don't get it, they start to even tell me that I'm wrong to feel this way, right? So then I'm like, but I need to share this. Someone's gonna get this. Someone's gonna understand what I'm saying. And for 30 years, I looked for that person. I looked for that person in every stranger I met. And didn't feel it, didn't get it. Maybe here and there, like breadcrumbs, but didn't really feel that they get me. And so I started sharing it on social media by wearing like really expressive, strange outfits on red carpets, media, sharing emotions. Some people started to come forward. And I'm like, so it's not all in my head. There are some other people who think the way I think. Then last year in May, I felt like I just don't want to go through life anymore like this. It's just, I just don't want it. If this is what I am, this is how life is going to be, I just don't want to go through it anymore. So I left my job, my work. I left everything. I left LA. And thanks to my amazing mentor, Poonacha Machaya and Deepak Chopra at Chopra Foundation, they advised me to go to India. And I went to the southern temples of India with another mentor, which Poonacha referred me to. His name is Shiva. He's a PhD scientist in energy healing and quantum physics and psychology and astrology. I went to that temple. It was in the morning, and a bunch of people, which I don't know how they survived, because there was no food there. There's like, the weather is horrible. They have no money. It's just, they were mantra chanting, right? And I didn't know what mantra chanting is. Do you know what mantra chanting is?
Yeah, a little bit. But you can explain it if you want. Yeah.
It was like,
yeah, and they kind of repeat the...
same thing, right? And I'm like, oh my God,
Right.
What am I doing here? Okay, maybe so I was nervous. Suddenly, something lifted me off the ground. This happened, I experienced it. I don't have enough scientific knowledge to tell you, but I'm just going to tell you what happened to me.
Right.
I went on my tiptoes. Something lifted me off on my tiptoes, and I started like going like this, like whirling.
Right.
It wasn't me. It was something. Like as if from above and beyond, something was just moving me. And I went somewhere, it was outside of my body, and I felt that love.
Right.
That love that I could not explain. People were not understanding me, and my mom didn't understand it, and my dad would I wouldn't even bother telling him about it. I felt it, and it was real, and there I was like, oh, it exists. Right. I'm not crazy. And then many other things happened. I remember seeing everything as if I got on a helicopter, saw myself outside of my body, why I came to this body, what my soul's purpose is. At the time, I was suffering from an autoimmune disorder. I understood why I had done that to myself and
Right.
fixed it, healed it right there and then.
Right. And I think that part of it's always looking at the return to that exactly that place of connection, also in the womb or in the spiritual part of the universe. I think that's amazing.
So you tell me.
But I think what's amazing is the universe gave that experience to you, not a man. And by the way, you gave me the clue that I was looking for. So there's a point, even if you watch the video, there's a point where I smile because you said it, and you said it twice. And it's interesting how you say that you bounce off it. So when I said we're doing a virus scan on ourselves, we're a virus maybe at a computer or something like that is the part of the program that's not let's say in your case maybe isn't divine or it's imperfect or it's not coded perfectly. And twice you said, and where your whole attitude changed from glowing when you're describing this to I wouldn't even bother to explain it to him. And my dad, twice he said this. So I think the thing for you to sort of work on is your journey relationally, if you haven't already, is that meeting men who have elements of your dad and saying, if this partner can understand me, see me, understand me, meet me there, then it heals the wound that I have from my father that I still carry with me. Right? So if I can pick someone who seems available, but they're really not emotionally available for me, and then I can get them to be emotionally available for me, I can heal little Megan, the little girl who had still adult person who still explains it and says, I had this amazing experience and I can't even fucking tell my own dad because he is not going to even understand me, so why bother? If we go back to the beginning of the conversation, be like, oh shoot, it's not about men. It's not even about me. It's about there's this thing that happened and now I can be conscious of it. And now I can start working on just changing that pattern.
And you're saying if someone has elements of my dad, it'll make me choose them?
Yeah.
Just to make them to give that emotional support?
Yeah, and to heal that through getting it. Often, by the way, another thing that people will do is you might meet someone who actually is giving you what you lacked from the parent as a child, then somehow we'll turn them into that parent if they're not already that parent. So it's just being really conscious that very little, we were talking about projection earlier, so much stuff is project. Just recognize your patterns and then doing the healing around them. I think consciousness is the first step. Then having those transcendent experiences like you did, going somewhere, you're out of context and you're really purging and getting to a higher connected place. And I think, and it's funny too, it's interesting, I'm really just listening. And the other way we can hear trauma is when we hear contradictions. So you're saying, like, I really want to be understood, right? By your partner and by your father and by your partner. At the same time, well, I'm scared to show myself here because someone sees me, they may not like me. Do you hear what I'm saying? Right? So you're saying, here's what I want, but then my behavior is something different.
Because I always felt like the only part of me my dad didn't like was the fact that I had like emotions that he couldn't understand.
Boom. And that's why you don't like them, because it's your dad's voice.
The book, We're Only Loved When We're Dead.
Oh, everyone loves you when you're dead?
Well, sorry, what was the book?
I did a book called Everyone Loves You When You're Dead.
Everyone loves you, yes.
Yes.
Did I say you're loved when you're dead?
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is
No.
Which is kind of true. Like, we're just nicer to people who aren't around anymore because we don't fear them and don't compete with them.
That's why we love them when they're dead.
Right.
So your book, was it about your experience? It was about your experiences with a lot of people, observing a lot of people, correct? So,
Yeah.
like, what made you write that book?
Yeah. I feel like most of my life, a lot of people like to talk about the game because obviously, like, dating is one of our biggest pain points in the culture, or just as human beings, just our personal pain points. But I spent most of my life interviewing people, interviewing musicians, artists, film stars, and just like you're doing, the authentic moments were what I treasured. And so I tried to put a book together of like the most authentic moments of someone really showing their vulnerability or their insecurity, because I think we put these people up on pedestals, and they're just wrestling with the same stuff we are.
Wow.
This person was in the book because they died a long time before, but I was reading for a project I'm doing about Abraham Lincoln, right? He's maybe seen as one of the most important historical figures, but like, he was deeply depressed. He carried around a knife in his pocket. His friends wouldn't let him. His friends would always take it away because they're afraid he was going to kill himself. And he talked about, like, if I have enough sadness in my heart to like fill the whole like country. And so, but we look at him as this great figure and we think, if only I can be as great as that, and not recognizing that everybody's kind of human and struggling and dealing with the same fears. So when I interviewed all those people, I felt like, whatever problems I have, maybe whoever it is, Tom Cruise or, Mick Jagger or like Lady Gaga or whoever it is I'm interviewing, like Bruce Springsteen, whatever it is, I'm like, whatever I'm dealing with, they're dealing with on like a times 100 level. So I want to learn about how they navigate their problems. So that was that book was about. Yeah, it's interesting.
And what was your top moment or one of your best moments that you felt truly connected with some of the people you've interviewed? My favorite
person ever. There's Chuck Berry. Do you know who that is? So he's amazing. So Chuck Berry literally invented rock and roll. Like, he literally invented rock and roll and and then was put away in prison over something or other, and watched the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, all these big bands become successful without him. And so they were like, Chuck Berry, he's like literally the icon. He literally invented, so they're like, he doesn't do interviews, like, he probably won't like you, like, he hasn't done an interview longer than 15 minutes in like 30 years. And I came and we got along so great. I really got to see his heart. I got to understand how rock and roll is really developed, not what I've read about. And we became, like, for the last years of his life, like, had a great connection. So I loved him. And he just wanted to make me laugh. He wasn't trying to talk about himself. Like, his connection was just making jokes and saying funny stuff. And then we just started laughing, and it was the greatest ever in your life. So check out, if you look up Chuck Berry or look up his music for anyone listening, you'll hear it just in everything. Oh, for sure. I'm going to check him out tonight. How about, who's the most spiritual celebrity you've ever interviewed or came across? Yeah, I would say there's a guy named Gilberto Gil, who is a Brazilian artist. I met him, and I always remember he just had this aura that just kind of glowed, and I just felt warm in it. So I guess that would be that. Like, he just had that energy. And what kind of artist was he? I think a lot of like kind of bossa nova and Brazilian style music, but just beautiful. You can hear his soul through his music. So check out Gilberto Gil. Back to, again, attachment style. Right. A lot of us women are dealing with the fact that a lot of men don't want to commit, right? At least we think men don't want to commit. I don't know if it's true or not. And then women try to trap them. Different ways of trapping a man to make him to commit, which I think is a very inauthentic way of getting someone to commit to a relationship. Because if you're trapping someone to commit to you, obviously they're doing it out of fear and not out of authenticity. Because if they were doing it out of authenticity, you wouldn't have to manipulate them.
Why do you think women do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I'm hearing like a lot of sort of generalizations. That's okay to point out. So I think a lot of men want to commit. I bet every one of these, when we're talking about, has met men who wanted to commit. They just probably don't want to commit to those guys. But meaning that, and it doesn't mean that they should. Meaning that I mean, a couple of thoughts. One is, I think everyone wants to commit at some point. Like, let's just face it. If you're just serial dating nonstop in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, like something's really, really like, and you never commit, there's really some issues you really have to look at. And you're probably an outlier, right? Most people, I think, really do want to commit. But I think I think chasing commitment could be as bad as chasing sex, you know, in the idea that I'm objectifying you to meet my need. And separate from men and women, some people, you know, I don't want to say that women do this or men do this, but some people, what if I just meet you where you're at, right? And we let whatever develops kind of develops and give it time to work out. I mean, certainly there are situations where people meet and within the first week, they're like, this is it, this is the one. And there are other situations that happen really, really organically over many, many months and a year into it, or a year and a half, or maybe 2 years into it, like, oh, I don't know if that's happened, but yes, you're the one. And I think just so much, you're talking about spiritual work, right? And so much is about being present with what is, right? And why don't we just be present with what is with someone and choose them in each moment? And if it comes to a time where there's a long series of many moments where we don't want to choose them, or we don't choose them, then we sort of move on. But I think like people future project themselves out of a relationship. I bet those people who we're sometimes, also people, one great thing about nonviolent communication is it's about bringing forth what's alive in someone, right? And if what's alive in someone is not thinking about commitment or not being ready for commitment, then we're not being attuned, respecting kind of who they are, right?
Maybe if we were all pickup artists, all marriages would have lasted, because we would keep being pickup artists for each other and date each other forever and make an effort. And then that would be a way to get out of this whole rat race of just dating and then struggling with commitment. Maybe we should all be pickup artists.
I hear what you're saying. I think I hear what you're saying, which is like, I think it is true not to take someone for granted that you're with, and you've done a lot of studies, and continually learning more about the other person and being surprised by the person helps the kind of love last and continue for sure. And absolutely, I think it's important to like, Helen Fisher, the evolution biologist, has done like some studies, scientific studies on this, and I can't remember exactly because I read them a long time ago, but really that element of surprise and doing novel things together and all those things really help.
I want to actually share a message there are a lot of women.
But the overall point is, I think like going back to what we want and we create the opposite, if like we keep looking for commitment and not getting it, I would guess that the moment you throw out the idea of looking for commitment and just like meet amazing people, the right thing's going to happen. I think maybe it's a little trust the universe and trust the connection. Like if you're with someone and it's mismatched in terms of where you're both at, then maybe you need to keep finding someone you're matched with. And maybe that 1 year trying to get someone to commit, close the door and finding someone incredible in that year. But I'm sure on a spiritual level that letting go of outcomes allows what's supposed to happen for you to happen more readily and availably. Don't you think?
Absolutely.
Right.
So if a woman is trying to get commitment out of a man who doesn't want to commit, she has some trauma in play.
Or what if we take it to a more spiritual level, that maybe try to get something out of anybody is not meeting them on a human level?
Any manifestation or any psychic work that involves a decision that involves another person, meaning if you're manifesting for your partner to marry you, if you're manifesting for a particular person to work with you or sign a contract with you, you are sending energy to affect their decision making without their approval. And that's the manipulation energy, which is a dark energy. It doesn't come from the divine source.
Yeah, and you were saying, so what we're trying to manifest should be about us and our relationship with the universe, and not involve the will of other people. Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you would love, I really think that's true. I think the idea of knowing what's right for other people, what they should be doing, that their will doesn't matter, they should be meeting your needs, all these things are like spiritually toxic.
My God, I wish I could speak in your words, because not only you hear me then, because English is not my first language, it's my third language, right? And sometimes I want to say something, but I don't know how exactly put it into words. And
Right.
you do that perfectly. Nobody had ever done that.
Okay, I'll take 3 languages. Learning 3 languages would be great to know.
Yeah.
So thank you.
But this was fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank you
you
so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. This meant the world to me. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
No, thank you. That means a lot. And by the way, I'll just share this note since you've been so vulnerable, which is, so there's a gift of all our trauma. So my ability to listen to you and hopefully hear what you're saying, and really came from a highly enmeshing mom, like we talked earlier. So I was highly mom enmeshed. And when I was like 7, when I was a kid, she talked about all her problems with my dad, and I'd have to listen, understand things that I couldn't listen. And so all these things maybe that we also try to heal also help us in great ways and give us gifts.
Yeah.
So maybe to end with, like, we can really be grateful for those things that happened that weren't ideal growing up, and maybe keep the gift and remove the part that holds us back.
I love to end on that note. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. That's really
appreciate
wonderful.
it. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Welcome to the Mindvalley podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a comment. This is so motivating for us, and it inspires us to help creating more incredible free content with the world's best authors.